the expectations in terms of that experience are very, very poorly delivered by an old school HR mindset, which really thinks of the HR function as people and process, as opposed to questioning how you can deliver that organizational capability through a combination of technology, people and process. And the T of the technology is you can just automate so much more now, and the doability of that is mind-blowing now.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. Today I'm joined by James Baker, Head of HR at Jaguar Land Rover. We're going to be talking about the impact of increased volatility and uncertainty on organizational design, leadership and culture. However, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Enjoy. Welcome to the show, James. How are you?
Thank you, Chris. I'm great, thank you.
So I'm in shorts and t-shirt, by the way, because it's very hot outside for everyone listening.
I'm jealous about his in the shorts and t-shirt.
You came in, you was like, I should wear shorts and t-shirt.
I thought about it.
Yeah, you chose the one day to come to the studio when it's 32 degrees outside.
Very nice.
Yeah. Well, first, how are you? It's been a while since we last spoke.
I'm good. It's been a vibrant couple of years, I think, for most people.
Yeah, definitely. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and your journey to where we are now.
Oh, blimey. Okay.
Where do I start?
So where do I start? So I started my HR career in recruitment, spent some time running my own business, and then I think it was my wife actually persuaded me that I just love working in big companies. She had a similar path to that, and ended up doing some consulting work for Disney for a bit, actually trying to sort out their recruitment.
Nice.
And on the back of that, my kind of sort of parting thing is, look, you've got a load of senior recruiting coming up. You should really start to think about doing your leadership recruiting in-house. And this was before kind of that was a kind of a popular thing to do. And they was like, that's a really good idea. Would you like to do that for us? And I was like, well, maybe. I hadn't really thought about it. Actually, I was trying to get an outsourcing contract out of them. Oh. It's another long story I won't kind of go into. And they said, oh, it'll take us sort of 6 months or so. And I was like, well, I'll tell you what, that's probably a little bit long for me just to wait. But at the time, it was sort of just as the internet was coming, LinkedIn wasn't really a thing then. And I figured you probably needed to partner with somebody. And so I basically said, look, my favorite supplier at the time, which was a media boutique, was trying to get me to join them. I said, look, I'll go work there, because it's the type of thing that if you can do it outsourcing, you'd probably want a joint venture. Still had that sort of that sort of entrepreneurial mindset. And then after a couple of years doing that, and my earlier background was in executive search. Time Warner called, right? Which is, if you think of Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, Time Warner and Disney are those kind of players within media, and they basically were trying to do the same thing. They were trying to professionalize that in Europe, and wanted somebody with a more of a professional search background, because they're having some traction issues with some of the divisions. And I was like, well, I just kind of wrote that business plan for Disney. Why not?
Yes, sure, yeah. Why not?
And look, I had a great time, and got to build some businesses, the TV production business, hired the team that set up the studio tour, which is really good fun. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have to ask why on earth would you leave the film and TV business, right? Because it's a really cool business, really interesting. And a guy that I'd worked with at Disney had gone to see Jaguar Land Rover, and they were trying to transform their recruiting operation. Their biggest pain area was leadership recruiting, and he was like, "I know a guy. I know a guy that does that." So
you're saying most of your opportunities have come through the network?
I would say all of my opportunities. I've only ever got a job.
Shows the power of networking then, right?
Yeah, 100%. We were just talking about that before, weren't we?
You literally just talking about that. I want to highlight that part for everyone listening.
Yeah,
the importance of building a network.
And that's, as a sort of former headhunter, that sort of is something you learn. And I'm always amazed. There's, I can normally get to pretty much any expert on anything within a couple of phone calls. Yeah. Just having done that for a long time. And yeah, look, I mean, yeah, JLR was great because it was a blank piece of paper, an opportunity to really kind of design a function and all the rest of it. And so I went in, just basically set up a team to do that.
So it's starting from scratch.
100, yeah, employee number one, all of that.
Wow, that's
And
pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very,
It's very
very
rare
cool.
you have an opportunity to do that in such a large, well-known, established business.
Yeah, and with a very low level of maturity at the time in terms of what they wanted, which was great because you could really shape it. And I remember at the time, the mindset was like our big problem is access to talent, right? So they, and that's like, on a maturity levels, like I can't get the people, whereas, for leadership recruiting, you should be saying, do I have the right capability to drive the organizational culture, behaviors, values, as well as the commercial, success. And we really went on that journey, and I'd like to think we did a really good job of building a fantastic team there, and then eventually ended up running the broader talent acquisition function, and then a year and a half now, so moved into my current role, which is head of HR for overseas, which again,
what does that mean? Overseas, literally all of any operations overseas.
Yeah, so it's basically it's the really the emerging markets. So anything from Russia, sadly at the minute, to India, Latin America, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pac, excluding China. So it's a really fascinating collection of growth markets. That's sort of complex and therefore quite good fun.
Yeah, are you traveling a lot?
We've just started to dial up actually. I mean, naturally, I think like a lot of businesses with COVID, firstly for safety reasons, right?
Of course.
And secondly, through cost control, we kind of dialed that back. We have started to do that again, but it is I think we're still at a point where we recognise that COVID's sort of proven how much you can do digitally. There is still risk. We're still having people catch COVID whilst travelling. So, but we also recognise the value of human interaction, right? So
balance.
So it's a balance. So my view is, go where's needed. I think as the economy improves, as we were talking about, perhaps towards the end of this year and next year, depending on what happens with the economy and hopefully things get a little bit easier. I'll probably dial it up a bit more. But I'm still in the sort of fiscally responsible mindset, I think.
You kind of have to be as well. But in the past, we wouldn't have. Do we really need to travel? Do we really need to do that now? We kind of, we've been forced to actually
I've flown all over the world, for many years, and I still am, frankly, a big believer that if you can meet somebody, I mean, doing this in person is much nicer than doing it over Zoom. 60% of communication is visual, and there's a lot more to pick up. But it's expensive to travel, and £5,000, £6,000 for a business class flight is not to be sniffed at. You send a lot of people, that's a lot of money.
That's true. Something we were talking about beforehand as well is about how the consumer expectations have changed. Virtual, doing it digitally has also changed that. Love to hear your thoughts around that and how that's obviously impacted the business, but also the HR team. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously I sort of come from a talent acquisition background, but I've always had from my background early background as a technology and a recruiter and technology and media recruiter and interest in technology, and actually delivered a lecture at Oxford Said on the applications of AI in the automotive industry.
Oh, really?
But a big part of that was a bit of a mashup of some of the sort of data science use cases, but also for talent acquisition, right? But for me, the single most important factor is, and I was writing this before COVID, right? So this was very much the business case narrative that I was pushing was, consumer expectations in terms of how they interact with brands, right, are no different to candidate expectations, which are no different to employee expectations, right? So, and we're now so used to the kind of 2-3 click phenomena
Yeah.
that Apple pioneered so
It should
many.
just work.
Yeah, exactly. But super simply. I mean, the
Yeah.
Apple user manual is sort of like what everyone should refer to, and you can't deliver that without effectively deploying, AI-based technology for recruiting, frankly. And very few. Well, interestingly, the number of businesses that are doing it is really increasing. I think if you get it right now, it's a competitive advantage. If you don't implement it within the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to be at a disadvantage because the use cases are going up, and it has multiple applications from the degree to which you're employing the sort of best practice, that was pioneered within digital marketing in terms of managing your sort of digital candidate funnel. The degree to which you are using sort of AI-based technology as a job recommendation engine to assist with your diversity strategy, because men are more confident than women in terms of basically saying I can do anything. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Whereas ladies are naturally more humble, which is a good thing, but it's not a good thing in terms of applying to jobs. So if you can suggest something to somebody, they're much more likely to click through. And then, of course, you've got everything in terms of the assessment workflow and candidate management and all the rest of it. So the expectations in terms of that experience are very, very poorly delivered by an old school HR mindset, which really thinks of the HR function as people and process, as opposed to questioning how you can deliver that organizational capability through a combination of technology, people, and process. And the T of the technology is you can just automate so much more now, and the doability of that is mind blowing now.
Yeah. How does it affect how you and your team operate, having that technology in place?
Frankly, we don't have some of the stuff that I wanted in place. They're now looking at that. But it's one of the reasons I moved jobs, actually. But anyway, by the way, but JLR, has publicly, so I can say this publicly, is very, very focused on digital transformation. So, and we've got an entire team dedicated to it. We've got a big push towards robotic process automation. So that's sort of gathering at pace. And I think, some of the things you can do are really exciting, but equally, sometimes people get too excited about the possibilities of things. So, this is a problem with any kind of resource allocation game in organizations. People look at something and they kind of go, oh, we can save 300 heads from that.
Yeah.
And it's only ever the best case scenario, right? Whereas actually with our RPA, I grew up, one of my first jobs was working for an SAP consulting house.
Okay.
And one of the sort of euphemisms for SAP, great software, but it pours like water but sets like concrete, right? And that is one of the problems with any form of automation is you set up a process and that's fine. You set up a bot, that bot's designed to save a head, or whatever it might be, but that's set, right? Your investment in that piece of technology is set. So you need to make sure that in the way that organizations change and move, you don't pour it and have it set like
So the pitfall is although it's solving a problem, it kind of makes you less agile, long term.
You just need to be careful about your use case. Things like chatbots, whatever, I think are really great uses of technology, because those are developmental by intent and design, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can if you're designing something which has got a mindset of continuous improvement to it, which is will feed in the questions and answers that we get to deliver a better experience. That's a better use case than something that requires all the inputs and outputs to be static. If that's the case, I
get it. Yeah, it allows you to be more fluid, constantly update, constantly innovate, as opposed to concrete, literally. We've kind of heard a million perspectives on this, but I'd always love to hear yours. what do you think was actually driving the Great Resignation, the Great Awakening, there's a great everything now. There's about 20 versions, I think I've heard so far.
Yeah. Look, I mean, we chatted about this briefly before, didn't we? Fundamentally, I think our parents and certainly our parents grew up in a world where you had a career for life, right? And the degree to which there's loads of research and there's different attitudes of different generations towards long-term employment, and we put large volumes of the workforce on furlough, right? And there was a high degree of uncertainty in terms of what was going to happen. I think everybody in the world, you didn't know whether you're going to catch a deadly virus, right? So if that isn't going to give you a developmental life perspective and make you question what's valuable to you, and whether and shift you towards a more holistic and humanistic outlook on your life, like mortality is quite a powerful, developmental angle, right? But equally, a couple of things happened, didn't it? You had a lot of cost cutting within businesses, so some people lost their jobs. People's trust in their organisation, right, in terms of whether they were going to have their job or not, was significantly eroded. And then, of course, what happened is, when the sort of demand curve kicked back in, and by the way, the automotive industry demand drop in April when it kicked off was 97%.
Up.
Down.
Oh, down, I was about to say.
Yeah, so 197%.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, and that kind of demand shock was across multiple industries. My wife worked for in the hotel industry, right?
I spoke to many of them.
Interesting period in our household, I can tell you. So,
I can imagine.
So I think, so I think you had this sort of, what's my life about anyway? Lots of time to think for a lot of people,
reflect,
and then just a super hot labour market, right, with lots of opportunities. You've kind of gone, hold on a minute.
Perfect storm.
It's the perfect storm. and what's interesting, Chris, I think, is actually how that then is likely to play out and continue, because actually what's happened is you've got lots of people retiring early, right? So you've got contraction at the top of the labour market.
A lot of people left the workplace.
And there's a very, this has been brewing for a while, but, I saw some interesting stats on labour market supply in China. It's been declining since 2016, and the curve, is pretty profound. And that is a worry for the world's economy, by the way, because that's a huge economic engine. But that's fairly common across a number of countries, because people are just having kids later and less of them.
Yeah.
So you've actually got this sort of potential long-term pinch on, labour supply, which is another reason, by the way, to get really good at talent acquisition, I would argue.
Yeah, I never really thought about that long-term that effect. What about the kind of role of HR itself? Because we were speaking before when we hit record, of reminiscing of the times of where we were to where we are now. How have you managed to constantly disrupt James along the way? Because I think if you're working in HR, disruption comes with the territory. It's ever evolving learning. You're on this constant learning curve.
Yeah, look, I'm one of life's learners, and I've always, I'm burdened with a high degree of curiosity, right? And which is a blessing and a curse.
You have to have that culture of curiosity.
Yeah, it's yin and yang, and I've always liked to understand the problem that I'm facing into, right? And it's a recruiting thing, because I never liked to be. I like to be educated with the audience I was sitting against, so I'd always do research against the problem I was facing into, and we were chatting before, and I think the function came from human resources. It started off as being payroll, really cost control, and I think it's slightly struggled with that legacy.
Even now.
Yeah, absolutely. And whereas you take a kind of McKinsey's perspective now, and they will talk about, quite rightly, I think, the apex of the organisation should be, in the modern world, CEO, CFO, and CHRO, right? And of course, because organisations are, organisations of people. That's what organisation means, right? It's an organisation of people. But I think what HR is being asked to do is just so materially different, right? Because you've got these, very, very complex technological and societal trends that are placing demands on organisations that just haven't been there before.
No.
And one of the things I studied academically was uncertainty. So I've set my studies against Avature. So.
Mm-hmm.
Uncertain, changing, and ambiguous context. And the world's always been changing, right? And initially you had sort of disruptive innovation, massively affected through technology. So the pace of disruption, there's some really good charts showing the pace of that change increasing, and of course that's quite challenging for companies. And then. You've got this problem in terms of the way that strategy and planning was historically done in organisations. So organisations basically start, being fairly agile, small business, small teams, and then eventually as they get bigger, they grow hierarchy and bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right. And and how do you manage a big organisation? Hierarchy, bureaucracy, and planning and strategic planning. Right. But planning assumes that things are going to stay the same. Right? And so, some pioneering organisations like Shell kind of move to things like scenario planning, which are quite helpful. Quite an interesting problem with AI, actually, is it doesn't work well in a high change context because it's based on priori knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the implications of that level of uncertainty then have profound implications for how you can manage an organisation, because you can't plan in the way that you thought you could. The importance of culture and the values of the organisation, right? So how do you create an adaptable and a learning organisation that can respond to that context? Like these are kind of real
small things that HR have to deal with.
Small things, and of course that's where the sort of whole agile revolution has come from.
Yes.
But then agile in of itself.
Yeah.
And
how's that affected the traditional HR org design then?
Something like agile is really difficult in that if you speak to people that have done it, and we're working with it as we stand, it's like sometimes a lot of these things are like the next exciting piece of corporate bingo, right?
Yeah.
And there's some really good aspects of agile, but you can't apply it like a one size fits all everywhere. There are aspects of it that are very, very helpful, but the reality is it's going to be helpful in some parts of your organization, less so than others. But it does have, like most things, it's like a kind of a knife wielded by the an improper user could be dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to kind of have people working with you, understand what it is and what it isn't, what it's good for and what it's not, because you can't flip a large organisation into totally agile overnight. It's a real change process.
Yeah.
And it won't work everywhere.
What have you seen has been the biggest challenge so far?
Okay. So I think if you understand what agile is, trying to apply that to a hierarchical organisation, right, with multiple layers, it's inherently challenging, because what you're asking leaders to basically give up power and
let go
and control, right? Because it's about radical empowerment of teams and a totally different way of working, and that's more comfortable for some leaders will manage in that way anyway. Yeah. Others won't, right? Giving up being the expert. Most leaders
hoarding information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look up the rules of power, right? Well, it's you've read the work on that, and so to operate in that way, to let other people function as the experts is a huge culture change, and I think most people that work with Agile will tell you that the cultural change aspects and the people change aspects of it are some of the hardest things to do. And then the other problem you've got, of course, is you've got one part of the organisation working Agile, but these guys aren't, right? And then that's a problem, because actually, I mean, the other people will talk about this better than me, but what doesn't work is saying, right, you've got a day job, and now I want you to do agile on top of your day job. If you're going to run a part of the organization in agile,
Okay.
that works. But then you're always going to get some of that because by definition, you want a cross-functional team of subject matter experts. But if you're sort of mid-transition phase and your organization isn't built like that, that's much more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably easier building an organization in agile than it is trying to adopt it on the side. But then agile organizations that are young then often don't have the systems and processes and the bureaucracy that are needed as they get bigger, right?
Interesting.
So Costa, the Harvard professor,
yeah.
would say actually the ideal thing is I'm drinking myself water.
That's all right.
Is a combination of the two, but it's quite hard to get right.
Yeah, you're kind of almost seeing the same challenges in hybrid work right now.
Yeah.
In many ways, like of managers letting go of like,
and then seizing it back again.
yeah, exactly. You're kind of seeing that balance take place, and it's not. We all have the tools, we have the technology. That's not the issue. It's the people. It's the culture. You know.
And you know, I think this debate's going to rage on, isn't it? I mean, there are undoubtedly huge benefits to doing what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Being in the room together. There's, I think, some you know, human elements to that, right? Which are, it's just nice to feel that connection. Actually,
Yeah.
there's a need for people for that, and you can get different type of work done. But equally, you know, I think, you know, for most employees, it's been the you know, the shift to a more humanistic way of working. You know, massively beneficial for, you know, diversity and inclusion because it's really going to fit around people's lives more effectively. You know, great for well-being because people can use the commuting time to kind of basically stay healthy, provided that it's not creeping into the at the end of the work days and so on and so forth. But it's a balance. You know, it's a balance between the two, and I think, you know, the problem with these things is often polarity thinking, right? You know, it's not that one thing's the way forward. It's what's the balance that's right for a context. If you're running a factory, hybrid's problematic.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, and also like they will constantly shift depending on where each of those employees are in different stages of their life. You know, as well. You know,
I think it's you just need to shift from a parent-child mindset to an adult one, and if you employ good people that are highly motivated and have the right conversations, it'll kind of sort itself out. And of course, you know, if you've got a highly capable employee that's motivated to do their job, is going to probably need much less interaction and support and guidance than a new employee. So it's contextual, isn't it? But you know, some of the more interesting debates around it are, you know, how do you for a new employee, how do you get them to build their network when they don't have one? You know,
in a virtual context as well, it's even harder.
In a virtual context, if you take something like, I think Jeffrey Pfeiffer made a comment on this recently. You know, because of affinity bias, right? I.e., if I spend more time with you, I like you more. You know, hanging out with people more senior than you is better for your career, right? Because they just like you for, and generally you're going to be more favourably treated. So if you haven't got very good objective measures in your talent system and in your performance system, you know, it's probably not good not being in the office for your career. And regrettably, you know, most organisations don't. I mean, that's why, you know, for instance, performance management has been dropped by some organisations, picked up again and dropped, and you know, and so I think some of those things are, you know, material challenges that HR, you know, needs to wrestle with over the next few years. Because I don't think hybrid's going away. I think it's now I think if you know, it's just now become a
table stakes.
In a tight talent market.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even Elon Musk, right? You know.
Oh, his recent one.
Yeah, well, but he started backpedaling quite quickly, right?
Is he?
Well, yeah. And I mean,
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, so with Twitter, he was now saying that exceptional employes can work remotely.
Yeah,
so
is it?
Yeah. So
after saying, if you don't turn up, I'll take it that you're resigned.
Yeah, but again, that's an interesting context because, you know, fantastic business, Tesla, but it's a momentum business. People get stocks and shares. When you're relying on the extrinsic rewards for people, right, you can get away with quite a wide range of sins. When things start going badly, like when your stock price tanks 40%,
then
you need to start laying people off. Then actually the employee value propositions, the deal for employees becomes much more important. So I think what you can get away with on a growth and momentum business is different, for a business which is is going to go through turbulent times in economic cycles.
Which is then really more leaning towards the why, the values, the purpose.
Well, that's the point. And this is, one of the interesting trends we're talking about, things that HR needs to wrestle with is, I think, sustainability and the common good is, something that, is now just, a business necessity. You've got businesses like Unilever almost being criticised for plugging this too hard. But I think people don't want to. There's so much greater awareness now in terms of things like global warming and issues in the society as well. The media as a result of that, because there's just more access to information.
Yeah.
And people want to be part of.
I never even thought about it when I was younger. Did you?
I don't know.
Not so much as I do now. Like I remember first seeing the Simon Sinek TED Talk to start with why, and it's like, what is your why, your purpose? And I remember sitting in my desk at lunch, being like, I couldn't even answer it, and it stuck with me for weeks, months, mate. Even I was like, outside of just money and my job that I do, why do I come to the show every day? And it really got to me. I was like, I don't know why I come here every day.
So, man's search for reason has been sort of there for many years. I think, look, I think fundamentally, people prefer to be as part of an enterprise that is doing good for society.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that about Jaguar Land Rover. There's always been a good stream of that. Much easier when you're pushing into electric vehicles and that type of thing. But there's always been that kind of that flavour to it. But I think that's much more important now, and it's no longer a nice to have. I think it's a business imperative.
I agree. Listen, before I let you go, I want to jump into our quick fire round, which I do with everyone. So I'm going to ask you some quick questions. Brace yourself. But you've got 30 seconds for each question.
Okay.
So are you ready? Best. What are your hobbies and passions outside of the office?
Hobbies and passions. Which ones will I admit to? So none of them you probably guess about me. So I'm well into my yoga, which is something I've done for many years, but sort of dialed up with a bad back in more recent years. But I get a lot out of that. Yeah, but yoga and meditation. Curious mind, so I kind of always liked, from about 19 actually, got really into my hi-fi. I think it's actually as much of how it works as much as anything else, but also sort of hi-fi music's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Always liked how things worked. I worked out power to weight ratios on a moment. I've got the magazine at home when I was about 16. Motorsport family, and I suddenly worked out the motorbikes had like the best power to weight ratio ever. So I drove a motorbike before I drove a car.
I love that.
Yeah, and I sort of have great fun preparing them for track, and even like sort of.
You ride them on the track as well.
Yeah. But
nice.
but honestly, I used to do like years ago, and I used to do it properly. I used to have like all the data logging and all that thing.
Really?
Yeah, totally geeked out.
Wow.
Loved it. But you actually get to design a vehicle and then adjust it all. And
sure.
used to do my own engine mapping and everything like that.
Amazing. Because I saw you eyeing up Shane's bike when you came in.
Oh yeah, again,
cyclist.
was big into my cycling. Did kind of long distance of cycling events and
nice.
Did a bit of cycle racing back in the day. Yeah,
cool.
A bit sort of older and fatter now, but.
Fantastic. How would your friends and family, how do you think they would describe what you do for a living?
So I think what my daughter would say is I look after the people.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah, and that's sort of that's where
great.
That's normally where I come at, that's what my daughter would say. Yeah,
that's a good one. It's better than saying my dad fires people.
And
that's a good perspective.
Yeah, but it's also that's sort of how I just think you get more out of people when you work with their best intent, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I agree. What would you say is like the one thing that HR leaders don't talk about enough, but they should?
Honestly, for me, you know, what I hear less of is this really driving business value, right? Because fundamentally, if it's driving business value, it's good for everybody, because you've got a positive economic engine, which then is good for the people.
Okay.
And I think sometimes HR can be differential. So I hear this thing sometimes where it's like, it's about the customer, and the customer's the business. Like, no, but you are the business, right? And another friend of mine who's a ex-McKinsey guy, not the guy I was talking about earlier, but made a really good point. I think a good HR person is a member of a management team that happens to represent the people function, but is able to talk as much about the business issues, but just contribute through a people lens. But you should be comfortable talking about the P&L, or the product, or whatever it might be, and looking at the capabilities that you're going to need to deliver that. And a classic example of that is manufacturing. Right now, for instance, you can either choose to build a manufacturing plant, and hire several thousand people, or you can outsource it. So the debate really is about the organizational capabilities that you need, right? And whether they are they people? Are they technology? And I think that shift in mindset towards, not the people aspect, but what are the capabilities the business needs, and how do you best deliver that?
Work back.
In a commercially viable way.
Yeah, love that. Who would you say has had the biggest impact on you in your career?
Geez, that's a tough one. I've been really
Apart from your wife.
Yeah, well, that's unquestionably true, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I've been lucky to work with a number of great people. I don't think I would single out any one, because I think you take you take a gift from everybody that you work with. You know, I've been really lucky to have people that have believed in me at different points in my life, and actually sometimes you learn from the people that aren't so great, right? Because
that's also just as valuable sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, the difficult people in your life are sometimes your greatest teachers. So
true.
I've definitely held that one. So I wouldn't hold out one person. I'd say I've had some the great pleasure to work for some truly amazing and inspirational people, and I think I'd be unkind and ungenerous to single out just one.
Give a couple of shout outs. Because we're going to post this on LinkedIn anyway. So who's a few people you shout out?
Oh, man.
No one's going to feel upset if you're like...
Do you know what? I'm going to shout out Graham. So Graham hired me into Jaguar Land Rover, and Graham trusted me to get on with my job, fundamentally. And I think I was at the right point in my life to just have someone that trusted me to work hard and figure it out.
Nice.
And fundamentally, actually, he was one of the best bosses that I had for just having your back, right? And wanting you to grow and develop. So and he sort of when I said I wanted to go to INSEAD to do a course, he backed that. When someone gave me the crazy idea of going off and doing a doctorate, it was like, okay, if you think so, and I'm like, I'm not sure, but yeah, exactly. And we didn't agree on everything, but we always had a
That's
good...
also a good thing, though.
Yeah,
you don't want someone who's just going to agree with everything you say either.
No, and like sometimes people are like, you went too far, and I was like, yeah, but here's why I went too far, and we'd have a chat about it, and we're still friends now. But I could name...
I'm sure, yeah.
I've had several great bosses at JLR, so...
Amazing. And last question, what advice would you give to the HR leaders of tomorrow that are sort of coming up the ranks to sit in your seat?
So leadership advice, I think, the advice I'd give most leaders is, it's not about you, right? What got you here, right, is not what's going to make you effective when you're a leader. And that's one of the biggest paradoxes. And I won't kind of go into the leadership psychology that sits behind that, but there are marked differences between leadership emergence and leadership effectiveness, right? And what elevates your career and actually what you're required to do to it effectively. So that would be my simple point is, particularly if you're emerging, you tend to get promoted because you're very, very strong functionally, but letting go of that.
It's tough.
And celebrating and growing the people around you is, and frankly, giving them the credit rather than taking it for yourself, is one of the things that I think, I've observed leaders struggle to do, and giving up control.
Because it's weird, right? Because you think that you're gaining more control, but really, when I was a great salesperson, and then I was all of a sudden supposedly going to be a great sales director, and I realized very quickly it's completely different
Totally.
role, and I had to let go of the reins, and I was no longer being.
And I think in order to grow and progress, you have to learn to let go. I mean, it was it was scary for me to let go of my my job for the last one, scary for the last one, and geez, I mean, I'd never done this type of job before, but you can only do that if you are able to develop the people underneath you and let go. So I'd say those would be my. I could talk hours talking about leadership, but that would be my simple takeaway.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for coming in. It was good to
pleasure.
see you and I have you in the studio. And I wish you all the best until next week. I hope I come get to see you guys soon at the office and get a little tour.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.